Hello, welcome. I'm Christopher, and today I'm diving into the dumbest ways people got mauled by animals. From a man who jumped into dangerous waters on a dare, to a graphic designer who paddled into deadly waters just to impress someone he just met. But first, I'll kick things off with a guy who took a dangerous dare involving a massive predator. It was July 22nd, 2016, right in the middle of a Florida summer. And if you've ever heard anything about Florida, you already know the wildlife doesn't exactly chill out during this time. If anything, it gets more active, more aggressive. So hearing that a group of guys decided to camp near a remote canal at night, yeah, that already sounds like the start of a bad idea. Kian Vasquez was 28, a construction worker who had just moved to Tampa from Arizona about 6 months earlier. And I kinda get it. If you grow up somewhere dry, where the most dangerous thing you deal with is maybe a rattlesnake, it's easy to underestimate how different Florida is. But still, I feel like at some point you'd at least ask someone, right? Especially when locals literally treat certain areas like no-go zones after dark. Kian had this reputation for being fearless, but honestly, it sounds more like he just didn't know where the line was. You know those people who always take things one step further than everyone else, just to prove they can? Yeah, that kind of energy. That night, he and a group of co-workers had just wrapped up a long week and decided to camp near one of these canals. They'd been drinking for hours, and you can probably already imagine how the mood shifted. Jokes getting louder, dares getting thrown around, people trying to outdo each other. Then someone spots a pair of glowing red eyes in the water, and I don't know about you, but that's the exact moment I'm calling it a night. No hesitation. But instead, it turns into a challenge. Who's brave enough to get closer? Kian takes it personally. He starts talking about how he's not afraid of any reptile, brushing it off like it's nothing. At first, his friends are laughing, but you can tell it slowly turns into concern when he actually starts taking off his clothes and stepping toward the water. He strips down to his boxers and walks straight into the canal. Almost immediately, the alligator strikes. No warning, no buildup, just pure speed. It lunges from the darkness, clamps onto his upper thigh, and starts a death roll. It's violent, disorienting, and over in seconds. Then, just as quickly, it lets go, which honestly feels like the only lucky break he got that entire night. The noise from the shoreline probably scared it off, and Kian manages to stumble back out of the water. He's bleeding, clearly injured, but he's conscious, alive. His friends rush in, drag him out, panicking, but also probably thinking the worst is over. And here's where things take a turn that's honestly more frustrating than the attack itself. Because Kian starts joking. He downplays it, acts like it's not a big deal, like he just got lucky, and that's the end of it. He wraps his leg in a dirty shirt and insists he doesn't need a hospital. His friends tell him to get medical help. He refuses. And I keep thinking, was it pride, embarrassment, not wanting to admit he took it too far? Because that one decision, that's really what sealed everything. Over the next couple of days, his condition gets worse. The swelling increases, the skin changes color, the pain intensifies. What probably looked like just a bite starts turning into something way more serious. Infections from alligator bites are no joke. The bacteria in their mouths can spread fast, and in his case, it turns into severe cellulitis. By day 3, it's already bad. By day 4, it's critical. The infection enters his bloodstream, and he develops sepsis, his body basically going into full system failure trying to fight it off. He collapses in his apartment, and by the time paramedics arrive, there's nothing they can do. The medical examiner later confirmed it. Septic shock from an untreated alligator bite. And what really sticks with me here is how preventable it was. Antibiotics, proper wound care, even just going to the hospital that same night could have changed everything. So yeah, Kian survived the attack, but died from a wound he didn't take seriously, which really says a lot. But the next story takes us to California waters, where a guy tried to impress someone and ended up right in a predator's feeding ground. It was October 8th, 2017, along the Northern California coast. And this wasn't just any normal surf day. This was peak season for great white sharks, the time of year when the water basically turns into an active hunting ground. That stretch of coastline had seen a surge in elephant seal populations, which meant one thing: great whites weren't just passing through, they were staying there to hunt. Soren Arlo, 31, was a freelance graphic designer from San Francisco who had been surfing for about 5 years. decent experience, but not exactly someone you'd expect to handle high-risk conditions. And this is where things start to feel a bit too predictable. That weekend, he met a marine biology student at a coffee shop. They talked, and she mentioned she'd be at a nearby beach doing research the next morning. And I think this might have been the moment things shifted for him. You know when someone suddenly feels like they have something to prove? Soren shows up early the next day. The beach is mostly empty, except for a small research team, and there are warning signs posted around the area. Recent shark sightings, increased activity, all of it clearly laid out. And it wasn't just signs. The marine biology student actually spoke to him directly. She explained what was going on, that sharks had been actively feeding near the shoreline because of the seal colony, and told him it wasn't safe to go into the water. At that point, it's hard to ignore. Like, you're not guessing anymore. You're being told straight up. But Soren brushes it off. He claims he surfed similar conditions before, which from what we know wasn't really true. And I've seen this kind of overconfidence before. It's like people feel the need to live up to an image instead of just being honest about their limits. Because realistically, nothing would have happened if he just stayed on shore. Instead, he paddles out. And not just anywhere, he positions himself directly over the seal feeding zone, the exact spot researchers had already identified as the highest risk. Which makes me think, was he even processing what he'd just been told? The attack happens without warning. A great white shark comes from below and strikes with full force, mistaking his silhouette for a seal. One powerful bite to the upper thigh, and it severs his femoral artery instantly. Soren manages to scream once before falling off his board, the water around him quickly turning dark with blood. On shore, the research team reacts immediately. They shout warnings, call emergency services, and attempt to paddle out toward him. But the distance and how fast everything happened made any real rescue impossible. The shark releases after the initial bite, which is typical behavior once they realize it's not their usual prey. The water settles almost as quickly as it erupted. Emergency responders arrived shortly after and recovered Soren's body 3 hours later, still tethered to his surfboard by the ankle leash. The bite had caused catastrophic damage to his femoral artery, leading to rapid blood loss within minutes. The medical examiner ruled the case an accidental death caused by a shark attack, citing fatal blood loss and subsequent drowning. Statements from the research team, including their direct warnings to Soren, were included in the official investigation. Following the incident, the beach implemented stricter safety measures, including mandatory advisories and increased monitoring during periods of heightened shark activity. Soren died trying to impress someone with skills he didn't actually have, but our next victim made an even worse choice. He let greed override basic survival instincts when facing down one of nature's most dangerous predators. It was September 19th, 2015, deep in the wilderness of Montana, and this was one of those seasons where grizzly bear activity was higher than usual. The kind of time when experienced hunters start being extra cautious, not less. Because out there, you're not at the top of the food chain. Gideon Rusk, 45, was a bow hunter from Colorado with over 20 years of experience. And not just casual experience, he was serious about it. The kind of guy who invested heavily in his gear. Custom bows, premium. Optics, specialized equipment, everything top tier. I've seen people like this before, where the gear isn't just equipment, it's almost personal. Like losing it would feel worse than it probably should. Gideon had spent close to $8,000 on this hunting trip, and part of that included a set of limited edition arrows he'd been talking about for months. So when things didn't go as planned, he took it harder than most would. During the hunt, he spotted a large bull elk and took a shot, but it wasn't clean. The arrow struck poorly, and the elk bolted into thick brush, disappearing into dense cover with one of those expensive arrows still lodged in its body. And I get it, missing a shot like that probably feels frustrating, maybe even embarrassing, but this is where things start to shift. His hunting partner immediately noticed warning signs: fresh grizzly scat, claw marks on nearby trees, disturbed ground. All clear indicators that a bear had been in the area recently. And from what I've heard, that's usually your cue to back off, especially when visibility is low and you're dealing with wounded prey. But Gideon couldn't let it go. His partner warned him not to go in. Gideon went anyway. He convinced himself he could move quickly, grab the arrow, and get out. In his mind, it probably felt controlled, manageable. But the moment he stepped into that brush, everything changed. The visibility dropped almost instantly. Thick vegetation, limited sightlines. You're basically moving blind at that point. And instead of scanning ahead, Gideon was focused on the ground, following the blood trail. What he didn't realize was that something else had already found the elk, a grizzly bear, and not just passing through. It had claimed the elk as a food source, which makes this situation even worse, because now it's not just about crossing paths with a predator. It's about walking into something it's actively protecting. When Gideon pushed through the brush and entered the clearing, he walked straight into it. No warning, no time to react. The bear charged immediately, and this is the part people underestimate, how fast they move. There's no buildup, no chance to think things through. 1 second it's there, the next, it's on you. Gideon barely had time to register what was happening before the grizzly closed the distance. The impact knocked him to the ground, and within seconds, the bear delivered a crushing bite to his head and neck. The force alone was catastrophic. His hunting partner, about 250 yards away, heard the noise, shouting, crashing brush, then silence. He started yelling, banging equipment together, trying to scare the bear off, but it was already over. The entire encounter lasted less than a minute. By the time his partner reached the scene, Gideon was lying near the elk carcass, unresponsive. The injuries were severe. His cervical spine and trachea had been crushed, causing immediate death. The arrow he had gone in to retrieve was still lodged in the elk, exactly where the bear had been feeding. Wildlife officials later investigated and determined the bear had acted defensively while protecting its food source, which is standard behavior in that situation. Due to the fatal nature of the attack, the bear was located and euthanized in accordance with wildlife management protocols. The case was ruled an accidental death resulting from a wildlife encounter. Investigators noted that entering an active feeding site significantly increased the risk of a defensive attack. The outfitter involved in the trip later reinforced safety guidelines, emphasizing that no equipment should be retrieved under those conditions. Gideon died chasing a $300 arrow into a grizzly's dinner table. Next up, we head to a roadside zoo, where a college student's fascination with big cats drove him to climb the wrong fence. It was March 27th, 2018, right in the middle of spring break season, and roadside zoos were getting the usual wave of visitors looking for something quick, cheap, and a little different. You know the type of places: small enclosures, close-up views, not exactly the kind of setup you'd fully trust, but still enough to draw people in. Nico Draven was a 22-year-old psychology student from Ohio. He grew up in a pretty typical suburban environment, where the closest thing to a wild animal was something behind thick glass at a proper zoo. But he had this fascination with big cats, posters all over his dorm, hours of wildlife documentaries, reading into animal behavior. At some point, it started to shape how he saw them. Not as unpredictable predators, but as something almost understandable, maybe even approachable. And I think that's where things started to blur for him. Because watching animals on a screen is one thing, being near one in real life is completely different. During a road trip through Oklahoma, he and his girlfriend stopped at a roadside zoo, one of those places with chain link fences, warning signs, and minimal supervision. Visitors walked around, took pictures, and kept their distance. At least, most of them did. After the facility closed, Nico convinced his girlfriend to stay a bit longer. He wanted to observe the animals without the crowd around, said it would give him a better sense of their behavior, and I get being curious. But there's a difference between observing and getting involved. When he spotted a large male lion resting near the inner enclosure, he saw something else entirely. To him, the lion didn't look threatening. It looked calm, almost lazy, like it didn't care about anything happening around it, which I think made him feel like it was safe. His girlfriend told him not to go any closer. He ignored her. Nico climbed over the 8-foot outer fence, bypassing multiple warning signs, and made his way toward the inner enclosure. And this is one of those moments where it's like there were so many chances to stop, but he kept going. The lion remained still, eyes half closed, barely reacting. And I've seen people mistake that kind of stillness before. It looks peaceful, but it's not the same as harmless. Nico stepped closer. Then he reached through the bars. The reaction was instant. The lion surged forward and grabbed his arm and shoulder, pulling him violently against the enclosure. The force alone pinned him there, leaving him no way to pull back. His screams were brief. The lion adjusted its grip and delivered a crushing bite to his neck, causing massive trauma almost immediately. The pressure from the jaws likely severed major blood vessels within seconds. The entire attack lasted only moments. By the time the lion released, the damage was already fatal. Outside the fence, his girlfriend could only watch, screaming for help, unable to reach him or do anything to stop it. Staff and emergency responders arrived shortly after, but there was nothing left to be done. Nico was found slumped against the enclosure, unresponsive, with injuries consistent with a fatal bite to the neck. The medical examiner ruled the case an accidental death caused by a lion attack, citing catastrophic vascular trauma. Investigators confirmed that Nico had deliberately bypassed multiple safety barriers. The lion's behavior was determined to be consistent with a territorial predator, responding to an intrusion. Following the incident, the facility installed higher perimeter fencing and increased security measures. Local authorities also used the case to push for stricter regulations on roadside zoos. The lion remained at the facility, as officials determined it had acted within normal behavioral patterns. His curiosity about big cats cost him everything when he discovered they're nothing like the documentaries. Next, we head to rural Texas, where an illegal animal dealer learned the hard way that owning apex predators doesn't mean controlling them. It was June 11th, 2014, out in rural Texas, and this wasn't your typical animal setup. This was part of the underground exotic animal trade, the kind of place most people don't even realize exists until something goes wrong. And I've heard about situations like this before, people thinking they can handle animals that were never meant to be handled in the first place. Cassian Roque, 38, had been running an illegal tiger breeding operation on his 20-acre property for about 3 years. He started with 2 tigers and eventually expanded to 6 adults. And somewhere along the way, he convinced himself he understood them, which, I don't know, always feels like a dangerous mindset when you're dealing with animals that weigh hundreds of pounds and are built to kill. Cassian believed in dominance, that animals respected strength, control, authority. And over time, he got comfortable, too. Comfortable walking into their enclosures like it was just part of his routine. What made things worse was how he had them set up. In one enclosure, he kept a full-grown male tiger with a female he was trying to breed. And from what I've seen, even professionals treat that kind of situation carefully, especially around feeding time, because food changes everything. On the day things went wrong, Cassian followed his usual routine. He dragged 2 deer carcasses into the enclosure and tossed them down for the tigers. Immediately, their behavior shifted. Both animals became alert, tense, focused. The male started asserting control over one carcass, while the female moved in, testing boundaries. And this is the part where most people would step back and give them space. Cassian did the opposite. He grabbed a wooden stick, something he normally used to manage them, and walked straight into the enclosure. And I keep thinking, what made him believe this would work? Every time? Because animals aren't predictable like that, especially not when food is involved. The moment he stepped in, the situation changed. The tension between the 2 tigers redirected. Instead of competing with each other, their attention shifted toward him. Now, he wasn't the one in control. He was the disruption. Cassian started shouting, waving the stick, trying to assert dominance the way he always had. But this time, it meant nothing. The male tiger moved first. It lunged forward with full force, knocking Cassian off balance and bringing him to the ground. Before he could react, the tiger clamped onto his neck. Almost immediately, the second tiger joined in, and at that point, there was no recovering from it. 2 apex predators, already heightened by food aggression, reacting purely on instinct. There's no space for control in that situation. The attack was fast. There was no chance for Cassian to retreat, no time to reach the enclosure gate, no real way to defend himself. Within moments, the injuries were fatal. And what stands out is how quickly it all shifted from routine to irreversible in seconds. The property was isolated, with no nearby neighbors close enough to hear anything. Once the attack ended, the tigers disengaged and returned to feeding, showing no continued aggression beyond that moment. The next morning, Cassian's feed supplier arrived for a scheduled delivery. That's when the scene was discovered. Cassian's body was found near the enclosure gate he never reached. The injuries were consistent with a fatal neck bite, resulting in massive blood loss. Authorities responded by securing the property and removing all 6 tigers. The animals were transferred to accredited sanctuaries, where they were evaluated and placed under proper care without further incident. The case was ruled an accidental death caused by an exotic animal attack. Investigators cited unsafe handling practices and illegal ownership as major contributing factors. The property was later dismantled, and the incident was used by wildlife officials as a case study, highlighting the risks of keeping apex predators without proper training, facilities, or legal oversight. Cassian died believing he could dominate nature's perfect killing machines through sheer willpower. And now, the final story takes us to California, where a well-meaning visitor learned that good intentions mean nothing to a cornered predator. It was August 3rd, 2016, during one of the driest summers Northern California had seen in years. And when conditions get like that, wildlife starts showing up in places you don't usually expect. Closer to farms, homes, anywhere they can find food or water. Arjun Mehta, 52, was a software engineer from San Jose, visiting his cousin's mountain farm for the first time in years. He'd spent most of his life in urban environments, far removed from anything like this. Growing up in India, he'd heard stories from his grandfather about driving off leopards and tigers, stories about courage, about protecting your home. And I think those stories stuck with him more than he realized. Because sometimes, when you've heard something enough, it starts to feel like something you could do too. The night before everything happened, a mountain lion had killed several chickens from his cousin's coop. The signs were clear: tracks, scattered feathers, the kind of damage that pointed to a large predator. His cousin already had a plan: move the remaining chickens, contact wildlife officials, handle it the right way. But Arjun didn't like the idea of just waiting, and I get it. Nobody wants to feel like they're just letting something dangerous hang around. But at the same time, there's a difference between wanting to help and actually knowing how to handle the situation. Arjun started thinking of the mountain lion as just a bigger version of the animals from the stories he grew up hearing. Something that could be scared off with enough confidence, which isn't really how it works. He spent the day coming up with what he thought was a solid plan. Nothing complicated, just positioning himself near the house with rocks, ready to scare the animal away if it came back. And I don't know, this is one of those moments where it feels like things are being oversimplified, like treating a wild predator as if it's going to react the way you expect it to. That evening, just before sunset, he saw it. The mountain lion had returned, moving quietly near the chicken coop. This could have been the moment to stay inside, call for help, let someone trained deal with it. Instead, Arjun rushed outside. He grabbed a handful of stones, shouting as he moved toward the animal, throwing them in its direction. In his mind, it probably felt like he was taking control of the situation, doing exactly what those old stories described. But this wasn't the same situation. The mountain lion wasn't out in the open, with room to escape. It was near the barn, with limited space behind it, and without realizing it, Arjun kept moving forward. That's the part that really changes everything, because now, instead of scaring the animal away, he was cutting off its escape route. The mountain lion didn't run, it turned. And when a predator like that feels cornered, it doesn't hesitate. The attack was immediate. The lion launched forward, covering the distance in seconds and knocking Arjun to the ground. During the struggle, it used its hind claws, powerful, sharp, built for gripping and tearing, and struck his upper thigh. The injury was severe. Arjun tried to fight back, but there was no real way to defend against that kind of speed and force. The entire encounter lasted only a few minutes. Then, the mountain lion disengaged and fled. By the time Arjun's cousin came looking for him about 30 minutes later, he was already on the ground behind the barn. The wounds had caused catastrophic damage, including a severed femoral artery, leading to rapid blood loss. Emergency services were called, but there was nothing that could be done. The medical examiner ruled the case an accidental death caused by a mountain lion attack, citing fatal blood loss from the injuries sustained during the encounter. Wildlife officials later tracked the animal and relocated it to a more remote area, determining that its behavior had been defensive. Reports noted that the mountain lion had been reacting to a perceived threat after being cornered. Following the incident, the farm implemented additional safety measures, including motion-activated lighting and reinforced enclosures for livestock. Local authorities also used the case to educate residents on proper wildlife response protocols. No further mountain lion incidents were reported in the area after those changes were put in place.